step down. So I got a first-hand look at the budget issues that the city of Detroit was facing, and in fact did two things. First, actually put together a plan for eliminating the budget, not only in the short term, but also 7 years hence, because the thing is, we have to look at this deficit in this way. The city of Detroit has a structural budget deficit. What that means is that the way in which city government is set up is fundamentally wrong. And we will always spend more than we take in unless we change the structure of it. So my approach was, we can't only deal with this problem in the short term, we have to think about what we need to do to restructure city government so that we're not always dealing with deficits. And that's going to take a couple things. Sure, we're hearing about layoffs, and the reality is some of that we got to do. There is no way around that. It's not pretty, but the reality is some of it we're going to have to do. But the other thing that we also have to take a look at is the volume of contracts. The city of Detroit spends millions of dollars on contracts that in some cases we don't need. When I was mayor, for example, we actually identified a total of a half a dozen financial services contracts where we were spending millions of dollars for services that we determined after investigation we didn't need to be spending that money. So we canceled those contracts, we brought that work back in-house, and now we have city workers doing it, and we're going to realize an annual savings of a minimum of $2 million just from eliminating those contracts alone. We need a thorough, comprehensive review of all of our privatization contracts so that we can start determining whether or not some of those contracts couldn't be better done by city employees doing that work, and whether or not it wouldn't also save us more money. Ken Cockrell, Jr.
This is an issue that's really close to my heart. I'm the only candidate in this race that's a city worker, and I'm being asked to take a 10% cut. The mayor is working for $1. The chief of police is making $156,000. They're asking us to take a 10% cut in the police department. A 10% cut by the chief of police is not going to be close to what we're going to have to take. I make $50,000 a year. 10% cut for me is tremendous. 10% cut for someone making $150,000 a year is a drop in the bucket. I won't say he should take a 50% cut, but certainly he should take a little bit more than 10%, maybe 30%. But 10% I don't think is going far enough. If the mayor is leading by example and only working for $1, I think his appointees and other legislative bodies and executive members should also fall in a line and get behind the mayor. We're in a deficit. We have a crisis. And if someone's going to tell me that we all have to participate in this, then I want to see leadership participating in this and participating in this on the level that I have to participate in this. I don't want to take a 10% cut, but I'm willing to do my part if that's what's necessary. But I want to see particularly the appointees on the police department, many of them who already have a pension, and who are making $150,000, $60,000, take a nice sizable cut if you want to be equitable. So please forgive me for it, but I'm passionate about that. So John Bennett, candidate for Detroit City Council.
Again, Shelley I. Foy. I'm not in agreement of City Council taking a 50% pay cut. However, I think we need to lead by example. If they ask for a 10% pay cut across the board, everyone should. Some of you read the papers this week where our new police chief was given a raise when he was hired to $156,000. So when he take the pay cut, he's insulated from the 10%. He'll be back at the normal rate that the last chief had of $142,000. Leadership got to lead by example. It's got to be transparent. You can't ask the rank and file to take a pay cut, but you're making sure your appointees, some of them, have a higher wage when you bring them in. So when they take the pay cut, they're at the normal pay wage that it was. We all know that cuts are coming. I've been there with the city. This is not the first time Detroit's faced this. 1980, Coleman Young laid off 1,800 police officers. 1979, he laid off 400. I got called back in 1983, 82. I was laid off again that September of 1983. We've been here before. We know the pay cuts have to happen. I've been laid off by the city. Those things have to happen, but it has to be fair, it has to be equitable, and the citizens and the employees affected must feel that it's a fair and transparent process. Thank you.
James Tate. Yeah, I don't agree with a 50% cut on salary, strictly because, not in my case, because I believe that I've shown integrity and professionalism over the years, but I think what that does, if you cut the salary in half, it will foster attitude or a possibility of corruption, and we've seen enough of it already in our elected officials. I just resigned in April from the Detroit Police Department as the second deputy chief, and I took a 10% cut just last year. I know what it feels like to have part of your salary gone. I know what it's like. We have to make sure that we do everything we can within our abilities as elected officials to ensure that we find every bit of waste that is in those budgets. Now, there's a $3.3 billion budget. We have a $300 million deficit, $300 million plus. There's money to be found in that budget. And I want to do whatever I can to ensure that we find each and every dollar and make sure that it's accountable. Thank you.
I'm Joanne Watson. The truth is the City Council is currently operating at about 50% of what is paid across the board at executive level in the city of Detroit. Many citizens have no idea that the mayor's appointees make $140,000 a year. The city council directors of city council divisions, that is the fiscal division, the research analysis division, the city planning commission, they make $140,000 a year. City council members who supervise them have been making $80,000 for a very long time. And nobody is, especially in the East, no one's talking about any increase. And city council members have said and have taken 10% cuts and have already voted for 10% cuts. If there was a vote for a 50% cut, I believe all council members would remain. They would just tighten their belts and continue to do the work. You should know that the city right now is owed $300 million. Owed $300 million is only accounts receivable, uncollected. The state of Michigan owes us $130 million from revenue sharing unpaid during the Engler-Archer era. There are big firms that owe tons of money, unpaid water bills. We sponsored, the city council sponsored the water affordability plan and make sure that the 40,000 households that were cut off and subject to water shutoffs would not be subject to water shutoffs, or big corporations are allowed to continue to ramp up huge deficits. The accounts receivable is a clear priority for the city, and that's what ought to be attacked. And the city of Detroit, the mayor, along with council members, they need to go to the White House and demand a one-time only bailout, because we're the home of the auto industry that's been bailed out. The federal government is part owner of General Motors and has bailed out Chrysler. This city has a unique footage in the auto industry as one industry we're connected with, and we should not allow the city to not get the support it needs from the federal government.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem Watson.
Yeah, I can't add any value to what's already been said by everybody at the table with that regards to that particular issue. But let me just talk about the culture of development that's gone on the last 30 to 40 years in the city of Detroit. What we've depended on are giving tax breaks to large corporations for these big, grandiose development projects. Pole Town. We spent $500 million on Pole Town. And I ask you to drive around Pole Town today and see how that neighborhood has been decimated. We talked about another grandiose project with the airport expansion. It's going to save Detroit by creating all these jobs. Drive around the outer ring of the airport, at City Airport, and see how those neighborhoods have been decimated. We attempted to put the casinos on the riverfront. That fell through. In the meantime, our neighborhoods are constantly being deteriorated. Wouldn't it be a great thing to have police officers and firefighters, doctors and lawyers living in our neighborhoods? Let's give them an incentive to move into the neighborhood by cutting their taxes for 5 years if they'll move into the city of Detroit, take up residence in our neighborhood instead of giving all the incentives to the big businesses. Secondly, if the mayor and the chief of police would just renegotiate the police officer's contract and change the work rules And the work rules should say that any police officer with a gun and a badge that has an able body, has been trained in the police academy, should be on the streets in a scout car, and we will replace them with a reservist, a volunteer, or a civilian